All right, we're good.
All right. So first topic. So difference between learning and performance in our area of coaching, right? Like we can teach the kids as much as we want in practice or in a game or even ourselves throughout our own experiences. But you learn something. Like you can talk about it, but it's one thing to talk about it and another thing to be able to do it and execute when you have stands, when you have fans there, when you have the certain situation, like it's a championship game or it's a track and field event and you do a false start, you only get one more chance to execute. So you can practice all you want, but are you able to actually perform it in a variety of different situations? One thing for lacrosse, like we make sure the guys do a lot of dodges to warm up, just like to get their bodies being explosive, making sure that they're engaged. They have a sweat going before we start practice. They'll do various dodges without a defender in front of them, but that's just to get them, moving through space comfortably. When they doing that, it's tough to do it in front of an actual opponent. When they're able to backpedal properly, they can track you, and there's a stick that can, smack the ball out of your head. So it's tough to prepare for that without actually doing it on a consistent basis. You can practice by yourself all you want, but when you put a defender in a game situation, whether regardless of whatever the team sport is, it's one thing to be able to practice on your own, another thing to be able to play with defenders. So another thing is like basketball, right? You can have the best set shooter in a school, but set shooting doesn't mean anything if you can't execute on the court with a defender in front of you. So do you guys have any similar experiences in your sports?
Yeah. So I'm relatively new to like coaching pretty much just this year, but this topic actually made me think about one of my experiences playing, and I like was able to reflect on it differently because all this material was like pretty new to me and some of it was pretty surprising, just like the variability stuff and how that is so much more effective in actually like learning,
Right.
and instead of like really judging how well you're learning off of performance. I think one off season in high school, it might have been between my junior and senior year. I trained like all summer working on my weak foot because I never used it in games, and it was getting to the point where it was like so bad that it was embarrassing when I had to use it. But I started out really simple, probably for like 2 or 3 months, and I just worked on like hitting long balls or shooting, but I didn't vary what I was doing enough or do it in like different environments. Like I was going to the same place or I was going to an open field with just like one or two guys and working on striking the ball over and over again, doing a lot of repetitions, but a lot of the same thing. So when I got to preseason and like the beginning of the season, there were some drills that I felt comfortable doing it. Like if we were shooting with no pressure, I would feel comfortable taking my time and lining up and like actually striking the ball. And there were times where even my coach asked me like he knew that I was putting in a lot of work because I would never do anything like that. I would never choose to shoot with my weak foot over my strong foot. But those effects were, I found out, only temporary because once we got into gameplay, I found myself really just reverting back to only using my right foot because I was comfortable doing it. And throughout most of the practice, as soon as, because pretty much everything that we do would start out basic, not a ton of pressure, really to just get warmed up and get your like touches going. But as soon as it got past that and there was too much pressure on me, I feel like I was afraid to like make the mistake in practice to enough times to actually improve and actually learn and get comfortable with it. So stopped using it, and throughout the season I never really got back to it, and I never even trained for it to become adequate, which is one of the reasons I probably went and played D3 instead of D1. But it was cool to like look back on it and see like, okay, so I can take that experience and apply it to my coaching because there are a ton of kids who ask all the time. It's like, how do I improve my weak foot? And one, it's kind of just like sticking with it. But two, it's about like if you really want to improve with it, which is tough to do later on when you're trying to execute with like in high level practices and games because you don't want to make those mistakes, and your weak foot's often too far behind your strong foot that you're going to be slowing down everything and really just like breaking all the drills up. So it's something that you really have to train from the time that you're like before 10, I would say. And I don't know if there's something like that that applies to your guys' sports. I know that like Brittany, softball, switch hitting, it's probably something that like isn't really learned later on as a player. It's something that you kind of just have when you're young.
Yeah, for sure. You
Stuff
definitely
like that.
start switch hitting. Like if you don't start switch hitting when you're 6, you're screwed. Especially like in I guess in baseball it'd be a lot harder to do that than softball because softball you see a lot of like slap hitters who the only thing they're trying to do is bounce the ball into the dirt and hop it over the infield because they're fast. But for
Mhm.
baseball, you actually have to have the same mechanics on both sides of the plate. I think it's incredible when people can hit on opposite sides of the plate in the same game. Like that's like a different pitcher comes in and you're able to just switch your entire mindset and your mechanics to the complete opposite side. I can't even throw a ball with my left hand, let alone hit anything. Like it's just crazy to me. I feel like that's for yours, Joey. Scrimmages, like inter squad scrimmages are a good place to try that, especially if you didn't learn it when you were younger. So if
Mm,
you were trying to learn that skill later on in life, you would it's kind of one of those things you'd have to communicate to your coach and be like, "Hey, I might play really horribly in this scrimmage today, but I'm trying to work on using my weak side, you know?"
yeah. And I remember going to my coach at that point in time and talking to him, and his response to me, I think this again, it was like junior year, sophomore year, and he was like, "You shouldn't spend all of your time trying to improve your weak foot at this point because it's not gonna happen." He was like, "You should try and make it adequate." And he gave me like this 70-30 rule. He was like, "Spend 70% of the time training your strengths and working on your stronger foot, and 30% of the time taking repetitions with your weak foot." And I kind of use that throughout. And I think that lasted a little bit more than just like 90% of the time going with the weak foot. And especially for younger kids, like you're so caught up in winning that you don't really care how you do it. And that's one of the hard things about coaching is like, how do you create that environment that focuses on actually learning the fundamentals rather than because I mean for me getting kids attention, young kids attention, the only way to really get them engaged is to make it competitive and make
Right.
it a game like situation.
Yeah. Joey, have you ever had times when players can only play like in a certain practice, like you guys can only play with your right foot or you can only play with your left foot, just so it sort of forces them to learn that way in a certain
No,
situation?
that's
Oh,
actually pretty interesting because maybe they do that when you're really young,
mm,
but that's not like a method that I've really seen used at all.
You gotta
okay.
do
There
something.
are sometimes in drills, like if you're working on like a dribbling drill or a passing drill, it will be like, okay, only use your weak foot this time or only use your strong foot, but never in a scrimmage. And because it's really hard to monitor in a scrimmage. And like if someone does, because I'm just thinking about it, like there are a lot of things that I didn't consider as a player, how hard some rules are to enforce. Like, what is the penalty for someone that just like forgets and uses their dominant foot as opposed to their weak foot in a scrimmage? Like, is it a turnover every time? Because at that point, there would probably be a turnover or change of possession every like 2 or 3 passes because
Mm,
kids just forget. But I do
mhm.
think that the more that you implement something like that, maybe throughout the practice and then finish with a scrimmage that has that rule is one way that you can try and apply it.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. At least, so I asked that because in lacrosse, for example, while you are shooting a lot of your goals with your dominant hand, you have to be able to, as a midfielder or an attackman, you have to be able to play
Yeah.
on any side of the field because the way that plays rotate, you could start on the left side as an attackman, but end up shooting from the right side. So how do you
Mhm.
do that? Well, if I'm left-handed, sorry, if I'm right-handed and I'm on the left side, I have a better advantage shooting as a right-handed player because I have a better angle. But once I'm on the left side or the right side of the goal, I now have a worse angle as a right-handed player. So I have to switch to my left hand pretty seamlessly and get a shot off that way.
Yeah.
So because the game moves at a very quick pace, you have to be able to play with right hand and left hand almost almost without a fan noticing, okay, like he's more dominant in one hand than the other. So
Yeah.
you have to get to the point where your opponent doesn't know which hand is your strong hand. That's impossible for hockey, obviously, because for hockey, the blade's facing one direction. But for lacrosse, for all you know, the guy you're playing against could be right-handed, could be left-handed. You're not going to know within 3 or 4 minutes unless they're constantly passing with the same hand. So it's imperative that you practice with both hands in that regard. Yeah.
Danny, I'm actually interested. So, like in football too, is there a breakdown in like, because in soccer, when someone has a dominant foot, like you always know, like they go right, like they're always going right, they're always going to their right foot. Is that the same way in football? Like for a ball carrier, is someone who's way more comfortable carrying the ball in their right hand always going to go right so they can extend their left arm as opposed to the other way?
So this is actually something we coach. If you go, you're always taught the football should be towards the sidelines. So if you run left, it should be in your left hand, whatever. But, at the high school level, depending upon, how much coaching these kids have got before, whatever, it's not always the case. I mean, I have a senior running back, but he still struggles. I mean, he gets points taken off of his grade sheet all the time for that.
Yeah.
Other things like directionally like that in football that we try to coach, or just like general patterns you see. Most quarterbacks are right-handed quarterbacks, right?
Mhm.
A lot of your sprint out or bootleg or play action passes end up rolling to the right because it's easier to throw running to the right if you're right-handed, because you don't have to square your shoulders up. They're already square. So at our level, again, where kids do struggle with, squaring up their shoulders and stuff like that, when teams look at us and try to develop and analyze tendencies, okay, well, if they're on the left hash, they're probably going to run a sprint out or a play action, or they're more likely to, whereas when they're on the right hash and the field or the wide side of the field is to the left, they're way less likely to do that because their quarterback can't make that throw. So different things like that. And even if you run like a RPO or something like that, that's really popular, like the Eagles with Nick Foles made it really popular.
Yeah.
The way we run ours is we actually run like a speed option with an RPO. And one thing we've really had to coach is that pitch with the left hand, right?
Okay.
Just flicking the ball back to the running back, and that
Not
pitch.
as easy as it seems.
No, it's the first day was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. So we actually we have a devoted period within the individual period of about 6 minutes where he spends 3 minutes like running down a line with a kid in pitch relationship, doing nothing but pitching with his left hand. And then they'll do that sideline to sideline and he'll alternate arms, right? Just to work that motion. I mean, the option game is such a timing-based offense. We ran it in high school, and it's crazy. The first year we ran it, we won 5 games. The timing was there, but it wasn't great. And then the second year we ran it, the timing was better, it was smoother, and we won 12 games. So it all comes down to that timing, and it is something that you can deliberately coach. I mean, Savage, our quarterback, he's beginning of the year, he couldn't roll to the left and make a throw to save his life. Like, could not do it. It was the worst thing you've ever seen. Now he throws better rolling to the left than he does to the right. I mean,
Yeah. How do you train something like that? Like, how do you get like Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, who just seem like they can be rolling out to the left and throw across their body?
Right. Josh Allen with Buffalo is like really, truly the best I've ever seen at it.
Is that like an arm strength thing?
It's core.
That you can train?
It's core, 100% core. And that's why Savage has actually gotten better, because we put together a core program using actually the AB program from the movie 300. We kind of took it and modified it a little bit, and he does it every day after practice. But it's because he has that core strength now. He can twist his whole body and still get that throw off. And I mean, it has made a world of difference. And I think truly the reason he throws better on the left is because he consciously makes an effort to get his shoulders around.
Yeah.
So he almost slows. I don't know. It's like he just puts more thought into it, and it's like it's just a better, cleaner, more accurate throw. Whereas on the right, he's almost so relaxed that he just throws it. Like, I don't know. But it's definitely something. I mean, I'm not a quarterback coach, but I coach wide receivers. But coach came to me and was like, what can we do to develop, help him get his shoulders around? I was like, well, if you think about it, you're just twisting, so it has to be correlated. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Mhm.
it's been interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of like simple mistakes that you can I think the same thing happens in soccer where like if you're at a full sprint sometimes and you have to cross the ball, you got to get your hips around and square so that it doesn't tail off to the right or to the left. Where if you're not sprinting, you're just jogging up to the ball, you kind of like don't even think about it. It becomes second nature and you're more prone to make a mistake as opposed to like when you're driving at the line, you have to, it becomes like the forefront of your focus.
Right. We're working no similar thing. A lot of people when they throw a football deep, they want to drop their back shoulder. But
Mm.
you're actually supposed to stand tall. That's how you get more power behind your throw. And so we're working that right now. Like, basically I stand back there and if he drops his elbow, I just slap the crap out of his elbow. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
as stupid as it sounds, but I mean that's how we got to do it sometimes. I mean, it's at this level, man. It's really so fundamental. Like our program's been so bad for so long. Like had 6 different coaches in 8 years.
Hmm.
So it's
Whatever works.
yeah, there's just no development for so long. So like I have seniors that have no football IQ, but
Hmm.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
Or what you got.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you guys done anything in regards to working with athletes? Like if there's a movement that they're not doing well in their certain area, like whatever the sport is, can you train them to execute that movement well by doing something in the weight room? For example, like with Danny, right? If you're trying to get a guy off the line, can you give him landmine press? Can you have him do landmine presses to be able to push his body to like propel his body off the ground and push away simultaneously? Are there certain things that you guys do? Like, okay, if he can do well in the landmine press and he gets better, he's probably going to be able to transfer that over well to when he has to be on the line.
Well, so one thing this year with receivers, I noticed early on we were struggling with, again, like when you block at wide receiver, you're doing what's called stalk blocking. So your feet have to be able to move side to side, almost like playing defense in basketball. So my basketball guys, they're my best blockers, period, because they know that move, their legs and their feet and everything like they know that movement, right? But my guys that didn't, one thing that we worked on early is we got bands, the resistance bands, and put around ankles, and we basically did that full length basketball court, like all the way down every day, with a guy in front of you, and we worked that and worked that, just with that little bit of resistance with that band, just strengthening like those little fast twitch muscles and things like that, and it paid huge dividends. I think Friday night so far, my grading is probably the best blocking night that we've had so far. Other things, right? If you're a lineman and you're punching, right? We work close grip dumbbell press a lot, right? To get that good punch. Same thing with cornerbacks in a cover 2 defense, right? You're supposed to jam your receiver. So we work that close grip dumbbell bench press a lot, right? Just stuff like that. More practical stuff.
Brittany and Joe, how does this correlate? Like, how does the training in the weight room, certain movements, affect how they work on the field? And how do you notice, like whether or not they're learning?
I mean, there's a lot you can do in softball. I mean, I tore my labrum for the pure fact that my shoulder was not strong enough to be throwing as much as like as often as I was and as far as I was throwing. So when I got into PT, I learned a ton of just different, they're kind of weird, but a lot of resistance band things and like even I's, Y's, and T's, like all of that correlates so much to just strengthening your shoulder capsule and just everything on your like the back of your shoulder blade, all of those muscles, it's need to be strengthened. That's why you see so many rotator cuff tears and injuries in softball and baseball. And even for pitchers, you see Tommy John surgeries all the time now. And it's like you can work a lot of that in the weight room before you even get onto the fields. But I mean, when you're thinking of a high school softball program, and unless the program itself is like relatively good, you're not really getting weight room time. They don't really,
Yeah.
the school doesn't really care.
And that's a battle, every sport other than football, I think, fights all the time, because it's like football owns the weight room, right? So like
Yep.
track season, football's not even in season, and I still can barely get my team in there. That's just how it is. But have you ever used TRX straps?
Mhm.
Mm,
They're really good for like working that does muscle on the back of shoulder blade and stuff like that. That's something I actually started doing with our kids probably August, and we haven't had any shoulder injuries, so I've been
Wow.
pretty pleased with that.
Mhm. That's good.
Yeah, on that, I mean, since I've been coaching, haven't been able to have anyone in the weight room, so I can really only draw on like my 4 years of college,
Right.
3 years of having like strength and conditioning, because freshman year we didn't have it. And I mean, it definitely showed, and I felt it from how strong other people felt on the ball, because I think my junior year, I was one of the only guys on the team that was lifting like 5 or 6 days a week. And then once we got in with our strength and conditioning coach, guys weren't going in and working out as like bodybuilders anymore, which was really good to see. And there was a lot of variation in just like, instead of guys only back squatting, you got guys having like doing walking dumbbell lunges or reverse barbell lunges, step ups, split squats, and you could just see that all kinds of those plyometrics. You could just see, especially when people carried it on throughout the off season, within a year or two, because it really takes time to build those things up. The explosiveness, especially of the guys that were 2 years younger than me, even like the freshmen, because those are the years, your freshman and sophomore year, that you really see those jumps.
Right.
Because a lot of guys, and like you said, Danny, unless you're on the football team, you kind of fight for time in the weight room and like attention from any kind of like strength staff that you might have.
Right.
And so as soon as we started actually, like guys on the team actually started training the way that you were supposed to, I don't think we necessarily got a lot more talented as a team. I think guys always came in with talent, but we were just one of the programs that was known for being like small and kind of like pushovers for a couple of years.
Right.
And that's what people expected when they played us, and all of a sudden that's not what they got, and we started getting results. So
Right. Well, and I think just a steady, constant weight room routine and program too, just overall team health just gets so much better.
yeah,
You know,
hamstrings, you didn't
Yeah.
see as many like hamstring injuries,
hips
hip
too.
injuries.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like I said, this is our second year as a staff, and there was no weight program for like the last 3 years for whatever reason. And last year, our first year, I mean, it was like we had 3-4 starters hurt every single week.
Yeah,
And this year we got the weight program as best we could with COVID kind of rolling, and I mean, we got guys squat maxes are like 250 pounds higher than they were in August. Just because they're actually working out for the first time consistently, and they're 16 and hitting puberty and all that good stuff. So, I mean and we barely have any injuries. So,
Mhm. That's
That's
awesome.
why I look at I think it's the Eagles who have
I was
injury
literally
after
just thinking that.
injury.
Yep.
I was just
Yep.
thinking that.
Like
Yep.
they're always hurt, and I don't know who is running their entire
right.
program, but I don't know how they have not looked at their training staff and their strength and conditioning coaches and been
Well,
like,
it's the
okay,
Sixers too. It's like all of Philadelphia sports for some reason. The Sixers, every first round draft pick they've had, I think besides one, has missed their entire first season.
Mm. Mm.
The University of South Carolina actually fired their strength coach after last season because they had so many injuries all the
they
time.
yep, they did.
Yeah, that bald guy. I don't know what
Jeez.
his name is.
Wow.
They
How do you?
always
I mean, how do you get to that level though? I feel like at some point though, it has to be just some sort of a game situation that you're put in with like all the different possible things that can happen in a game, right? Strength and conditioning doesn't guarantee they're not going to get injured, right? It just limits the possibility of it happening. So,
Right.
I mean, what was it that significant? Listen, I'm an Eagles fan. I'm getting pissed that yes, the guys are getting injured. It's not fun to watch, but I do think that COVID had something to do with the fact that
I
the guys
agree.
weren't in the weight room as frequently. They were more sedentary. They didn't have the same diet, as likely leading to more inflammation. So, that could potentially be a contributing factor.
Well,
It
that's
did
like,
happen last season too, though. Like the exact same thing happened last season, just not as early on.
Mhm.
But this week, I mean, like, and certain guys like Deshaun Jackson hasn't
Yeah.
played a full game, I don't think, and he's tried like 3 years in a row, but he just can't do it.
I'm convinced he doesn't lift. I'm convinced that the strength coach does not even have a program for him anywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't
in-
look like he does much
in
lifting.
any
like
data.
Jamal said,
No.
84 don't stretch on game day. All
Yeah.
right. Whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, some
Mhm.
cats, I guess, just, whatever. But
They just think they're too good.
do
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, sometimes that can happen, right? You can, when you get to the top, when your goal is to make it there and you eventually make it, right?
Yeah.
You know that you might be there for a few years if you just do what you're told, you execute the way same way you execute in college, but you don't have to be committed every day. So you think, and then they sort of fizzle out.
You can watch some David Goggins or something, man. Get motivated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
David Goggins or Eric Thomas said, I
Right.
think he was with the Dolphins. He's like, hey, I get it. You guys are happy. You're all smiling. You guys made it. And that's why you suck now. So,
Yeah, David
So you-
Goggins says, his dog, no matter how many times he cleans the bowl, he's always hungry or whatever. So
Mhm, mhm.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
it's just different level of motivation.
right. Well, I mean, even back to your point about COVID with the NFL, I mean, week 1 this year, didn't they have like 8 ACL tears or something? Like when
Yeah.
Jeez.
Saquon Barkley and like all these other.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just the prime example of what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, what's the off season like? If I make millions, I'm gonna be on the beach in Miami, and I really ain't. I mean,
Mhm.
I've already got my contract extension,
Mhm,
34 mil guaranteed, whatever.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
well,
sure. Especially this year because no one knew what was going to happen. So I'm sure when the season started, the majority of the NFL was woefully unprepared.
Right,
Mhm.
and a lot of it too is like, well, if we do bad this year, like we'll get a mulligan because of coronavirus.
Yeah, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how our kids are looking at it. But like, I don't think our seniors realize like you don't get a mulligan here. Like, it's not like college where we can grant you an extra year of eligibility. This is high school.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you have to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd like to keep you, but
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, do you guys think that there was so much time taken away from the weight room and you could only go in a certain amount of time throughout the week that it's possible to lose the ability to learn a certain movement like that? These guys have bench pressed out of their minds. They've squatted out of their minds. They've deadlifted out of their minds for their whole career. So, I mean, I feel like there has to be a relearning aspect there. They can't get the same numbers that they got, midway through last season coming back from COVID, right? They have to teach their body to do all that again.
Mhm.
So with that could come some inflammation. It could come, some extra soreness. So if their bodies aren't prepared for that, then yeah, there's a possibility they can get injured. Do you guys think? What I'm asking is, do you guys think that those six months, like that, you have to do a lot of relearning, or because like they've ingrained it for so long that it sort of doesn't even compute?
I think
yeah, you can go, Brittany. You're good.
I think you definitely have to relearn a little bit because even speaking for myself, I was out of the weight room. I hadn't been lifting since January. I had a bad snowboarding accident. So I got back in the gym a couple months ago and my squat form was trash. I had to like re-coach myself how to squat, like my knees were bending in. It was terrible. I looked awful. I'm looking at myself in the mirror like what happened? So I had to redo everything and kind of go through my movements and start super light just in general and make sure I'm doing everything perfectly. And I think it's the same thing for them as well. Like they don't have, yeah, they may be able to squat 600 pounds. Saquon Barkley's stupid, stupid strong, but like
Mhm.
anyone that's off for that amount of time, stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we were trying to teach like power cleans before we left, and we had made a little bit of progress. We started with hang cleans, to teach like part of the movement, and like we were working up to it. But when we came back, we had to completely start over. I mean, for a 16-year-old trying to learn that movement, they might be 3 inches taller 6 months later than they were last time they did this, or they might weigh 10 pounds more, 10 pounds less, or, we had a linebacker gain 40 pounds and now he's a defensive tackle, right? So, yeah. All those hot Cheetos and Takis, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just your body changes so much, and, it takes a little bit more effort to tell your feet to pop, I guess, if you put on 40 pounds. So
Yeah.
it definitely, we had to start all the way back over. Like, went back to hang cleans, did those for a couple of weeks, then added, and now we're back to doing power cleans. But I definitely think, like Brittany said, like, not even just relearning the motion, but how much are you stretching when you're not working out either? Because I know me, similar situation to Brittany, I had to redo my squat because my hips had gotten so tight that, just post athlete life, when you're retired, you just don't stretch like you normally used to. So, I mean, just there's a lot of things that I think go into it outside of even just the mental aspect of it, learning the process, but have you been taking care of your body in the meantime?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think about too much practice, about practicing to the point where, you've done the same movement for like 45 minutes, an hour, and then you try to execute it and all of a sudden, like, you're falling flat or you're not hitting the mark. Like, I'm looking at one of the questions, like, what are 2 positive, 2 negative effects of practice? So let me think here. Like, one example, right? Like using a weighted basketball. If you practice too often with a weighted basketball, yeah, it's gonna be easier to pass the ball. But when it comes time in the game, you're not used to shooting the actual ball that you're using. So how can you're gonna have to correct your movement pattern, right? If you've been practicing with a weighted ball, you're gonna have to correct the force with which you shoot. Whether you're jumping forward or jumping back, like doing a fadeaway. Are you passing as hard, right? You could completely like, let's say you come back 24 hours after practicing for that thing, like with the ball for like an hour, you play in a really intense game and you're missing the mark. Like you're passing irregularly. You're not shooting as well. Do you guys think that too much practice can be a bad thing? Not injury wise, but like just like form wise.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you see the same thing if you practice hitting off a pitching machine.
Mm,
Like, yeah, there were weeks in high school, I remember, where it rained a ton. I mean, I live in New England and the spring here sucks.
mm,
So it rains all the time.
mm,
And you'd be in the gym hitting off a pitching machine in the cage, and you get out to your game that Friday and you are awful because you
mm,
haven't seen any spin on a ball, any speed changes, nothing. And then you think there's only so much you can do hitting off of a machine when you know exactly what's coming every single time. Like
mm,
at that point, it's just repetition. That's all it is.
mm, mm,
Yeah, I was gonna say that is the same thing as like going to a driving range for golf. Like, just because I've tried golfing like a few different times, the more that you actually go out and play and vary the environment that you're in, like going to the same driving range and hitting off of like the little turf rug that they have isn't going to do a whole lot for you, because a lot of what matters, like the amount of times, especially as someone who's not like really good at golf, that you're hitting straight up like that, where your feet aren't elevated above or below the ball, or you don't have to like hook or fade around anything and just make like little mechanical changes in your swing. Very, very rare. So that's why if you do go, they have like grass tees that you can kind of make like slight variations. But that's another one of those things where like going to the batting cages or hitting off of a machine and going to the range, you can only really make so much improvement. And that's why like that it's more for like a novice as opposed to a professional.
One thing in football, specifically in South Carolina, because I know the laws here, I don't know them in other places. After I graduated, they began to limit live tackling to 3 hours at practice during the week. That's all the live tackling you can have over the course of your 4 practice days. So that live tackling is hitting another human person and taking them to the ground, right? So since that time, I've seen more dummies being used, things called tackle wheels, which, they're great, but, you know, some teams, including us, and it showed Friday night, we hardly ever tackle each other and take to the ground because you got 32 guys, you don't want to hit anybody, concussion stuff, you got laws against it, this, that, or the other. And, so we're practicing form tackling on dummies, but dummies, when you go to wrap them up, they're not resisting you at all.
Mhm.
So I've seen since I've graduated high school just a gradual decrease in the ability to make open field tackles, all this stuff. I mean, our Friday night, the first 3 plays the other team ran were a screen pass for a touchdown, a bubble for a touchdown, and a spot for a touchdown. So all those passes were less than 3 yards from the line of scrimmage, and we missed an open field tackle and they took them for touchdowns. It was 21-0 before halfway through the first quarter because we can't make open field tackles. And I see it. It's not just us. I see it everywhere because there's just not that live tackling aspect of practices anymore. I mean, we don't even wear knee pads and pants at practice.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
we just wear shorts with padded girdles underneath and then shoulder pads and helmets.
At all your practices?
All of them.
Wow.
And that's a lot of people. Even your most successful, like Dutch Fork High School in South Carolina, who's won like the last 5 or 6 5A state championships, they do the same thing. It's just the way it is now because people are afraid to live tackle at practice because it's like a stigma of like, oh, you don't really care about the kid's health, but it translates, like we're saying, like there's a positive to it, there's a negative to it, right? Positive is, I guess, you're protecting player safety, but the negative is, your form tackling, open field tackling, that type of stuff kind of goes out the window. So.
Do you
Yeah.
think if like the way that you teach tackling in football could change that stigma? Because I
Right,
know like
I
playing,
agree,
yeah,
100%.
like you look and watch professional football games, and I feel like mostly college where you just see people. I saw it the other day, someone or last night I was watching the Penn State Ohio State game, and one of the I don't know which team it was, but all he did like 3 yards from the goal line was push this guy with his shoulder, and that was it. He ran through him and scored a touchdown.
Right.
And I'm like, in rugby,
Mhm.
God help you if you use your shoulder to try and tackle someone and you don't wrap them up and take them to the ground.
So there's actually been a push, and even so, the year after I graduated high school, the head coach at my high school actually brought in rugby coaches to teach tackling. There's been a big push for that. But I think the thing that we don't take into consideration, people say, well, rugby, they don't wear helmets, but they don't have all these concussions. Well, it's just like anything else, right? If I have a helmet on, I'm not going to be afraid to hit someone with my head.
Mhm.
But if I don't, I'm certainly not going to do it. So that's the thing that we have to suss out as a football, as a sport, as a game, right? Like, does the helmet help or hurt us, right? And if you're going to take the helmet away, shoulder pads definitely have to change because your head hitting hard shoulder pads is not going to be good for you. So it's just, and at that point, are we playing football or are we playing rugby? It's just
Yeah.
it's these huge philosophical questions about the sport that I think have been lingering for probably like the last 15 years or more. Certainly once, Concussion, the movie with Will Smith, as bias or however you want to look at it, it definitely brought light to the situation. And they've done studies, like I think like West Florida or something, some small college, they did spring practice without helmets last year. They just had like a padded, almost like an old school kind of leather helmet. And they had no concussions all spring practice. So
It makes sense. I mean,
yeah,
you're
there's a lot.
definitely not gonna hit someone with your head if you
Yeah. I mean, unless you
nothing there.
just hate your life. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess. I mean,
Well, yeah. I would say conversely, I watched a Clemson documentary. It was like it's not really a documentary. It was like 5 minutes long, but it was a strength and conditioning one. I watched it about 2 days ago. And in practice, the guys were wearing those same scrum caps
Mhm.
over their head, over the helmet, over like it was big enough where it could fit over the entire helmet.
Mhm.
So if anything, that would make while it's maybe protecting your head better, you might feel in practice like you can hit harder.
Right. Those are 4, if I'm not mistaken, they give those to guys who have like, they're like 1 concussion away from like being done with football. Because you have
Wow.
a max concussions you can get
Hmm.
before you're done.
Wow.
Like I went to college with a girl play shortstop on our softball team, and like she got her last concussion like her sophomore year. But like
Wow.
they still honored her scholarship or whatever, you know.
Playing
So,
playing softball. How many concussions did she have?
I think it's like 6 or something like that, or
Yeah.
5.
What? Oh
Yeah.
my
God.
god.
What could
Jeez.
she,
I
could
was
she
like,
just not feel the ball, or
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy.
Wow.
She got her last one. Her and second baseman ran into each other, and
Oh,
yeah,
what are the odds? Jeez.
yeah. No, it's and she, a lot of people blame the coach because the load management probably wasn't what it should have been, but
Mm.
I don't know. That's different people's perspectives, I guess.
Yeah.
But
well, I definitely think that there are just as many concussions in rugby as there are in football. I think rugby players are just incredibly, incredibly stubborn.
that makes sense.
So I was like, they don't care.
I
I
don't know
mean,
how you
I've
get
gotten
lucky,
knocked in the head
man.
and gone back into a game. So
Right. And see, that's the thing we're trying to avoid in football is the stubbornness, because that
mhm,
played a large part into like if you watch concussion, like those guys would get concussions and they wouldn't come out. So
Yes.
now anytime anyone's even slightly dazed looking or whatever, they're getting pulled. So
yeah,
it's just like with the anti-vaxxer thing, like with autism, like is there a rise in autism since we started doing vaccines, or if we just also at the same time we develop these vaccines, develop better ways to test for autism? You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
yeah.
So is it the vaccines, or are we just better at
Interesting.
detecting autism?
Hmm.
So it's the same thing. Like, is it like are they related or not? So
Hmm.
They-
So, Danny, could you elaborate on that? I haven't heard of that. What's that
the
study?
vaccine thing.
Yeah.
So have you heard about the whole people that are just like anti getting vaccinated?
I've
Yeah.
heard of it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's a big thing. Like I think mostly like famous people are big on it, like Hollywood people.
Mhm.
But the theory is that like all these vaccines, since we started vaccinating our children really heavily, autism rates have like went through the roof. So they're saying that something in the vaccines is like causing that. But if you look at history, right, around the same time we started doing that, we also really started to look at autism as, like not like, oh, he has autism, we should like get rid of this person. We started looking at it as like, what it is, right? It's just, it is what it is. Like, how can we help these people detect it earlier, that type of stuff, give parents resources to help raise these children, give them the best life, that stuff. So we started developing ways to detect autism earlier, more accurately, that type of stuff around the same time. So have autism rates really gone up, or are we just better at detecting it and knowing that there is a wider spectrum of autism? So like, for example, you may have someone with Asperger's who is very intelligent, but just struggles socially. Whereas before they might've just been like, oh, well, he's kind of weird, like he doesn't really talk to anybody. But now we know that, maybe, he's on the spectrum somewhere.
Mhm.
So the definition of autism has changed as far
Mhm.
as socially what is on the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
education, we see, we have there's a large spectrum of autism. For example, I have a student right now. He's very, very intelligent. He has like a straight hundreds in all his classes, but he only eats one thing. He eats cauliflower. That's the only thing he'll eat. He will not eat anything else. That's all he eats.
Wow.
Don't know why. That, he doesn't really talk a lot. If you ask him a question, he'll answer it, but he's not very talkative, just little quirks, right? Um, 100 years ago, he probably wouldn't have, nobody probably would have seen him as being autistic or on the spectrum in any way. So I think it's just as science advances, is again, like, is autism really more abundant now, or are we just better at detecting it? I guess is the bottom line.
Okay.
I think it's also like, I don't know. I was thinking this. I don't know if it's true, but
Right.
it almost seems like there are more, like in today's NFL
Mhm.
and NBA, like you see more serious injuries. I just feel like as the years go on, from like when I was a kid to now, like there's more ACL injuries.
I do agree with you there. And I almost think it's because like if you're in the NFL, you are like the peak of human existence physically.
Yeah.
Like if you get a league of people that are the peak of physical existence running into each other over and over, because NFL players today do not look like they looked 30 years ago.
Yeah, that is the one thing whereas like they look and perform way better than they did 30 years ago. But I'm more talking about in relation to like the non-contact injuries that you might see. But you could also think about it as in like these guys are way more explosive, generating more force than guys in the past are used to. So maybe, and that's like something that we could keep advancing with is like, how are we able to manage getting stronger?
Yeah, I just think it's more wear and tear. It's more stress on the body just existing in that league. I think in high school they told us after playing a high school football game, your body has been exposed to the equal force of getting hit by a car. College, it's equal force of getting hit by 18-wheeler. And NFL players, after playing a full 4 quarters, their body has been exposed to the equal amount of force of getting hit by a train.
Yeah.
So it's like, holy crap, that's a lot. So after 16 games, and this is why NFL players, when they talk about extending the season, you know, players so against it because like you're risking our bodies just to make more money for yourselves.
Yeah.
Like talking to the owners. And there's been a talk about shortening the season to 12 games because by the NFLPA because they want to take care of themselves. You know, if you shorten each season by 4 games, who knows? These guys might could play an extra 4 years. You know, I mean, who knows? Like, so that's the big give and take that they always between the NFLPA and the owners every offseason they talk about that. So, it's definitely like an interesting thing. I mean, 10 years from now, who knows? Like Saquon Barkley, you can't look at that man and tell me a person like him, I mean, outside of Bo Jackson, existed 30 years ago. Like,
no.
Mm-mm.
I mean, look at what Bo Jackson did to himself. He dislocated his own hip.
Yeah.
Like,
there were also like no LeBrons, and now you see like how many high school players and college players are evolving into that like 6'8" plus big guy that can move, that's agile, that's still relatively quick and can play small ball.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I think the opportunities for everyone to actually play, we have AAU teams now, travel teams, boarding school, like scholarships, like the amount of opportunity for basketball, especially, has exploded over the past 20, 30 years. Like, for example, like here at Phelps, we have about 6 kids from Brooklyn who are all either 8th grade freshmen or sophomores who all play AAU basketball every week or every weekend for like several months. So, I mean, that opportunity, AAU might not have been as popular or as common 20, 30 years ago. So now it gives kids more reps. It gives them more exposure. It gives them something to shoot for. So now they're actually motivated to practice and train, and they're playing against pretty good kids. They're competitive. So now the number of available kids who can actually do well is much greater than it was, back in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s.
And I agree. I mean, AAU in South Carolina, I don't even think it's been around 15 years. Like, I really don't. I don't ever remember hearing about it till I got to like high school. And I don't know how it is up there, but down here, like AAU is like how you don't even get recruited for like school basketball anymore. Like, I don't even know why for school. Seriously, AAU and travel is like how you get recruited. And I think baseball is kind of the same way too. Like your travel baseball and stuff like that. It's like how you get recruited. It's not playing for like Swansea High School. Like they don't scouts go to those travel ball games because they can see like 4 or 5 prospects instead of just you.
Of course. Yeah.
And I mean, and that's the talk of football. Like, does there need to be spring travel football, or like, can the human body really deal with that year round? Like, can you play football year round? I don't think you can.
Yeah. Yeah. At least with the way it is right now, there are less games being played, and you can still get film. So but also though, like there are probably less football teams than there are basketball teams or baseball
Right.
teams, right? But there are more players you're trying to watch.
Mhm.
Now, only a certain number of players actually have hands on the ball, right? Like a quarterback, you're watching one quarterback, right? You're watching two quarterbacks in the game. But basketball, you're watching five guys who can handle the ball. So, because now with the way basketball is moving, they're moving from having, a big center like Shaq or Anthony Davis. They're moving now to having guys who are like very not slim, but they're more toned and defined, and they could shoot a 3-pointer if you need them to. They can be the ones to take the ball all the way down the court if you need them to. The game is transitioning to a much faster game. That was one of our conversations we had a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
More of an athlete at center instead of a bruiser.
yeah, the demands are different. So with that comes every athlete being faster, every athlete being stronger. So I think with football, you have less games to be able to watch a player, but at the same time, you're able to make a better decision on like this guy's the guy because off of this game. And you have, while there are less opportunities, it's I'm trying to see. I think I lost sight of what I was saying. Just forget what I was saying.
I feel like that. I've been there. I think film has made recruiting so freaking different. Like Huddle being what it is, like the film website the software we use has made recruiting totally different. I mean, you don't even ever have to really come to a game to recruit somebody anymore. Like,
Yeah.
It's interesting, but geez, these kids are blowing my email up.
What do you guys think? Is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
I don't think so.
It seems like a
We-
good time
we-
to wrap up.
Yeah, we did. We covered a lot. This was solid.
Do we
Cool.
know? Sorry, I know I hopped on late. Do we figure out who's like doing notes or what this week?
I can do the notes since I was MIA last week.
All right, that's cool.
Okay. All right.
So that way
Thank
I
you.
can just upload the video and everything too.
Cool. Thanks, Brittany. Appreciate it.
I got it.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
Guys, next weekend I'm gonna be away Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I wouldn't want to tell you guys this last minute. Is there a time that works for you guys during the week, or is it only a weekend thing that works for you guys?
I should be able to do. I can do anything after like 7